Hello there, I'm Monika Schiavo, your host at Trash or Treasure, brought to you by the Zebra TV and the Zebra Press. Thank you for joining us for another episode, and I'd like to thank our sponsors, Alexandria Auctions, and the great team that works down there. I'd also like to thank my team here, our producer, Lainey Delaney, and our editor, Susan Fleischman. Let's see what kind of fun objects, some trash, and some treasure that I have in store for you today. Once again, we have our resident Alexandria auction specialist, Matthew Gminski, who has pulled aside some wonderful items that'll be in upcoming auctions. The name of this show is Trash or Treasure, and we're going to run the gamut today. I'm going to turn it over to Matthew, and he's going to start us off. Matthew.
Hey folks, thanks for watching today. My name is Matthew. I'm the manager here at Alexandria Auctions, and want to tell you about a few things that we have coming up. So, got a variety of items to show you folks, just a few different things. So the first off right here is going to be this nursery set. So when a lot of people are looking at collectibles, what they really want when they're collecting is something that still has the box. Because they might already have one, but if they see one and it's still got the original box, they're going to want that one even more.
Absolutely.
So sometimes folks want to upgrade their collection by getting one that's either in better shape or that has the original packaging. So this having the box with it is great. So this is by Wedgwood. These are made in England, and this is their Peter Rabbit design. So this is being sold as a set, including the lamp and including these right here. So having the original box and containers is always very important, even if it's not that old, because that can add to the rarity, because it might be a very common product, but then if it's still got the box, that's the rare part, and that's what the collectors are really looking for. So that's our first item that I wanted to show you.
Now we're moving from the sublime perhaps to the ridiculous. And as I said before we got on the air here, I have personal experience with this next object, basically driving around and trying to get the missing one for my daughter for her collection. Matthew, over to you.
So I'd like to start by saying that the late 1990s were a different time. When it came to collectibles, a lot of folks were buying items thinking they were going to make money on them in the future. And that did not seem to be the case with a couple of things that I'd like to show you. First of which would be these Beanie Babies. It's the kind of thing where a lot of folks in the late 90s and early 2000s bought them and thought they were going to have them forever. It was going to be a great investment, and that in the future they would make all this money. But really, what happens with collectibles like this is that if they were designed to be a collectible item, a lot of times they're not collectible because everyone collected them. There's still a whole bunch of them out there. The really collectible stuff is the rare stuff, the stuff that you don't see every day that they didn't make very many of. So these right here, we are selling as an entire lot. We're not selling them individually. We're doing all of these together as one box of Beanie Babies to see what they do. And I'll tell you right now, they're probably not going to sell for very much.
Well, when it comes to collectibles, that's become such an important subject. So many folks have collectibles in their home. Maybe they've inherited them, maybe they've gotten them as gifts. I think it's important for us in our show to really focus on the items that folks are likely to find in their homes. And I think this next set of items really speaks to that. Matthew, what have you got?
Yes, so here we have some collector plates. And these are nice older pieces. These are dating from the 1960s and 1970s. But once again, they were designed and sold to be collectible pieces. So that means that a lot of people bought these for gifts or they bought them themselves. And they're really not that rare anymore. It's great when items have the boxes, but these really don't have significant value today. So we usually sell these in larger groups because they don't command a very high premium. There are not many people that are knocking on my door looking for a 1968 plate. So some people will buy something in the year of their birth, but that's about it.
There you have it. If you've got something like this, Matthew or I can also help you try and figure a value. And one of the best ways we figure values is by looking at what's called price realized. We look and see not what someone wants for it on eBay, but what it has actually sold for, generally at auction in a public venue.
Yes, and that's very important to us because anyone could advertise anything they want online. I have a 20-year-old Jeep Cherokee, and I could put that Jeep Cherokee on eBay for $1 million. Doesn't mean I'm going to get a bid, and doesn't mean it's going to sell. So what you got to look at when you're looking at Jeep Cherokees is the actual realized price of what they have sold in an auction setting. And that would go for any item.
And we are going to take a look, kind of follow up on what we did an episode ago, at a particular metal, sterling silver. Something that a lot of folks have in their homes, but there's so much more to it than just knowing what sterling silver is. So again, over to you, Matthew.
All right, so the first thing I'd like to talk about is weighted sterling. So this is sterling silver, but it does have a weight in the bottom of it. So it's not solid silver. So what we're talking about here is that there's usually some kind of a cement or other material inside, and then they cover it with almost like a foil-sized coating of sterling silver. That way they could have a much less expensive piece to buy, but they could still really wow their friends at the dinner party because look at all that sterling. When in reality, it's a very small amount of sterling silver. But you can see on the bottom, usually it will say weighted right on the bottom. The other thing is, sometimes you can hear it that there's another material inside. And sometimes they're fortified with cement, other times they're fortified with a steel rod. Another thing you can do, if you're not sure what you have, is take a magnet, just a regular fridge magnet. If it sticks, then it's a ferrous metal, and it's not sterling silver. It still could have some sterling covering the outside like this piece does, but it wouldn't be all sterling silver. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is sterling silver. So this right here was made for Bailey, Banks & Biddle, probably dating from the 1940s, and we do have the whole set here. And these are not sold as a set, but sold as individual pieces. Some folks may just want the creamer, some folks may just want the sugar or the tea or coffee pot. And what's really neat about this kind of silver item is that there's so much variation in them, so much variety to collecting sterling, because it would depend on who sold it initially. Bailey, Banks & Biddle, known for their jewelry, also sold a whole lot of sterling silver, but they didn't make any of it. They had different companies make them for them, and then they would be branded as a private label exclusively for them, for whatever brand it is. Tiffany did the exact same thing.
About to say Tiffany comes to mind.
Tiffany is a very famous one for that. So whenever you see an item like this that looks like silver, check on the bottom for markings. If it's marked sterling, we know it's sterling. It could also be marked 925, and that stands for 92.5% silver. And that's going to be the silver content of it. So that's a good way to tell, especially on items like jewelry. Like this one, but this little piece here is going to be marked 925, which indicates that this is sterling silver. And then also some other pieces like this one right here is also sterling, and it will be marked as such on the back. Not all pieces are marked, but many are. And sometimes you can tell sterling silver versus silver plated items or from stainless steel by the way that it weathers and ages. Because real sterling silver is going to have almost a buttery feel to it, and the way that it tarnishes is going to be different than silver plated items, which oftentimes have a metal underneath the plating, copper, and that will sometimes corrode at a different rate than the actual sterling on top would. So that's an easy way to tell also. And then stainless steel is going to stay bright forever and not tarnish at all. So that's a good way to tell that one as well. So that was sterling, 92.5%. Let's talk about 800 silver. So it's not quite sterling silver, but it's still a high silver purity content. These are 80%, marked 800. So that's 800 out of 1,000. These are very common 20th century all over Europe, and a lot of them made their way to the United States. Where we commonly see these are not in serving pieces like these, which are commonly sterling, but in other things that people would buy to take home with them from a big trip. So it's a way that folks traveling overseas could see something silver, see something nice, but not have to pay that full sterling silver price. So these right here have two different functions, something that you might like.
Ah, yes.
So a lot of times folks were buying these originally as cigarette cases. Well, not a lot of people smoke today, but you know what a lot of people still have is business cards. And that's where stuff like that comes in handy.
Beautiful. And I guess if you wanted to, you could have this area engraved. And it feels great. And also, you know, when we go to test, I'm going to do this gently.
Yes.
Sterling silver is a very soft metal.
Correct.
And especially if you've got something like a fork or a spoon, you might be able to bend it.
Bend that handle just a little bit.
You just can feel it give.
That you can feel that it's got a little bit of give to it, and that it's not super rigid, and that's a good way to tell as well. Very good point.
Well, whereas silver plate is generally
very rigid.
Quite rigid, and
Yes.
will stay without moving.
Yes.
So thank you, Matthew. I do love this, and this is where I get into trouble by coming to the auction house and seeing all the goodies.
So a couple more things I want to talk about are things that people commonly think are silver, but really aren't. That would be items that are marked alpaca, which means there's no silver content at all, German silver, also no silver content, or nickel silver, also no silver content. Now, these pieces here, the sterling silver items, are going to do really well at auction because folks love to collect things like this, whether it's to put out and use, or if they're going to hold on to it for the future. Now, the future, a lot of folks are speculating that silver will go up in price, so that they may be able to get more for it in the future when the silver prices go up. So we'll see what happens, but in the meantime, it looks really good up on somebody's mantle.
And I wanted to take a few extra minutes to talk more about sterling silver, silver plate, and really the larger aspect of when a piece becomes really more collectible, back to what Matthew was saying, and perhaps something less valuable. So with this tea set, we see that it's really been given a whole new story because of what the mark is on this, and I want Matthew to just jump in a little bit more.
Okay, these were produced for Bailey Banks and Biddle, and they were also done as a semi-custom line at the time, most likely in the 1940s. This right here has the crest of West Point. So a lot of these were given as gifts. So as folks got married, it used to be very common for folks to get silver pieces, silver sets when they got married, and a lot of times from wherever they went to school. So this right here does say 1916 on it. So that crest there is from West Point. Very neat. So it gives a little bit more to it. So this would appeal to a collector of military style items, as well as folks that collect sterling silver.
Another thing that we get asked a lot all the time is, yes, these are ivory. They're to keep the heat from the pot from transferring to the handle.
Yes.
Can you still sell this piece with ivory?
Yes, and the reasoning is that it's a very small amount of the item. If it's not the primary composition of the item, we really don't have anything to worry about. So these are very old pieces, they're very easy to date, but really the easier items to sell are the ones that are made before 1990, because any ivory in items from those periods would be still okay to sell. It is pretty neat that it's got little ivory pieces there. They do show some cracks, but that's likely from age, wear, and use. And that's the kind of thing that can't easily be replicated, and that also goes to show that this is most likely an original piece.
And we're going to move on to an item that has had many versions, and we don't often get to see the original older version, and that's what we're going to be looking at here. Matthew?
What we have here is some Roseville pottery. Roseville was made in Ohio, along with many other pottery makers, in the late 1800s and early part of the 20th century. So this particular pattern is called the Donatello pattern. Some people say, well, why would you call it Donatello? I don't see Donatello on this anywhere. And the truth is, a man that worked at Roseville came back from Europe and he found this nice Czechoslovakian big piece that he brought home with him. And it was stylized sort of like this, and at the time it was attributed to Donatello. Yes, that Donatello. So he brought it back to Ohio, and he thought he needed to make a run of things that looked kind of like that to sell to the American public. So in 1916, they came out with this pattern, Donatello pattern, and they made many different pieces. Big things like umbrella stands. They had little tiny things like this that you just put a couple of buds in, little bud vase. They had all kinds of different pieces. This that you hang on the wall. Take a look at that right there.
A pocket or a wall, yes, hanger.
Yep, and then you put your flowers in that. And these things are quite old. They stopped making this pattern in 1929. Does anybody else remember what happened in 1929, which might cause some things to quit being made?
Let's see. Gee, no, nothing comes to mind.
Yes, so with the stock market crash, a lot of things went out of production because these were kind of a luxury item at the time, something that was, for decor, not for necessarily necessary daily use. So these pieces are pretty neat. A lot of times they're not marked, but that's okay. You can't really tell exactly what year they're from, but that's okay. Anywhere 1916 to 1929. Occasionally you can see some ink markings on them, but these ones don't have it. It's very common this many years down the road that they've been washed a bunch of times, and those little ink markings, if they ever had them, may be gone. So what I want to show you with these is that the flower pots in general will show some crackling on the interior surface. And that's normal, that's to be expected, and that's par for the course on an item of this age. And the reasoning is, as water sits inside here, sometimes it will permeate slightly and cause the interior surface to kind of crackle a little bit. Nothing really wrong with it, and just about all of them have it. So that's it, Roseville Donatello.
And Matthew, would you say these pieces have been reproduced over time, the
Yes.
Roseville line,
Yes.
and also perhaps knocked off? There are counterfeit versions of this.
Yes. Now, here's the thing about counterfeiting items. Are you going to counterfeit the cheap one? Nope. You're going to counterfeit the really rare one. So if we do see anything in an auction environment that tends to be something that seems very special, that's what you have to look at with an even finer tooth comb, just to make sure that
right.
you have what people think it is. Because a lot of times, folks bring something in, and they'll say, my grandmother got this, and it's worth $1 million and all this other stuff. The truth is, grandma got had. So I hate to tell people about things like that, but that is kind of sometimes how it works. Now with this particular line, these were reproduced, but they aren't really faked. These aren't of high enough value to have been faked. The Roseville Pottery Company went out of business in 1953 when they were purchased by a tile company. And people say, well, why are there so many pottery companies and tile companies in Ohio? Well, it's the natural resources. That part of Ohio is really great for the kind of clay they have, the kind of sand they have. Just the materials are right there on hand. So that's where all of these businesses popped up in the late 1800s and early 1900s. So there were others in the area that made a similar product, or sometimes a very similar product later on, but those are kind of attributed to, but not a direct copy of.
Thank you for joining us at Alexandria Auctions to discuss items that run the range from trash to treasure. Thank you, Matthew. We really appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you so much.
We're going to leave Matthew Gminski at Alexandria Auctions and visit another local small business in the area, a wonderful antique store south of Mount Vernon called Urban Redeux, and its owner, Willow Wright. Willow has set up for the holidays, and she's got some wonderful things to show us.
We're here today with Willow Wright, one of the owners of Urban Redeux, right here on Cooper Road, minutes away from the Mount Vernon Estates, right off Route 1. It's fantastic to have an antique store to browse around.
Thank you so much.
And I have to say, your whole store is decorated for the holidays.
It is for sure.
You've got all kinds of, it looks like vintage Christmas trees and ornaments.
We've got tinsel trees.
Garlands, tinsel trees.
Shiny bright ornaments for the ornament lover.
This is wonderful. And I see some things that are sort of seasonal too. The plaid ice bucket.
Tartan for all the tartan lovers.
That's it, tartan.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
great. Oh, wonderful.
I will say one of my most asked about pieces of Christmas decor, it lives behind my counter because unfortunately it's not for sale for anyone, but it is Grandmother Stover's Christmas tree.
It's a new one on
Toy
me.
tree.
Ah, it's shiny.
I don't know a whole lot about it, but it makes me happy to look at it with all the different charms. So somehow someone has created this little charm tree.
That is fantastic. I see some things that I'm only really 27, but that I maybe grew up with over here. Tell us about this little group here.
Well, these are little, like a little Mr. and Mrs. Santa Claus. I don't have an exact time period. They remind me of probably made in Japan ornaments. I'm not exactly sure again on the time. They have little hooks on them. And a lot of the ornaments of this time were made from paper mache or pipe cleaners.
Yes.
And a lot of felt. So these guys have aged very well over the probably 60 years that they may have been around.
Looks like something we might see too when I go into homes and help people figure out what to keep. They've often inherited items from their families, parents, grandparents, and that looks like something they might have come down through the generations.
I would think so. It's my lucky find to be able to have
Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. What other fun things you have here?
Let's see. This guy is an old dice game. I believe it's called a Chuck-a-Luck. It's made out of Bakelite on the bottom, and it's a gambling game. And I just recently looked up the rules, but it's almost like a almost like a roulette,
Right.
where you would choose your number, put your dollar down, and flip your coin, flip your dice, and that's how you would win your. And this was in an auction. I purchased a large box of items, and this was in it along with this box of antique dice.
They almost look like they're made of wood.
I think a lot of them are old wooden dice. So I never know. It's always a treasure box when I open things up to see what exactly comes inside of things.
And I think that's the most compelling thing about certainly what I do on the appraisal side. I just never know what adventure, right here, what I'll find, what I'll learn about. I've never even heard of this, although I'm familiar with bingo cages.
Sure.
Something, games of chance.
Exactly.
Something like that.
And this, a lot of times, this in particular, I wasn't sure exactly what it was. I knew it was a game, but oftentimes my findings will lead me down a rabbit hole on the internet to find the information about it. And I found that a lot of our customers want as much information that I can provide to them, either from what it is or where it came from or what part of the country it might have been popular. So I try to dig up a lot of information for them.
Fantastic. And then these little guys, looks like Christmas lights are happening here.
These are. So this is a box of Santa light bulbs.
Ooh.
And they are about 1.5 inches tall, maybe 2 inches tall. I don't know that they work because I have not plugged them in, but they also in a box of little tiny light bulbs as well. So anything in little box or collection I love. And these guys are really sweet. Yep.
Oh, these are great treasures. Thank you, Willow. Can we take a look around?
Sure, absolutely.
Your store as well? That sounds great. Something caught my eye, and Willow, you've got to talk about these paintings.
The paint by numbers.
Paint by numbers. Tell me, what's your interest?
So,
what attracted you to these paint by number paintings?
There's something about the softness of the artwork or the way the colors come together. These were kits that were purchased. You would purchase the kit, it would have numbers in each little area, and then it would come with the paint palette as well. So for instance, this would have been a pair because you can see the colors are the same. This would have been a pair as well. And then the ballerinas would have also been in a series that someone would purchase so that the colors go together. And it was the idea that everyone could become an artist in their own home and create something. However, there is also a big difference between how accurate the artist was. So for instance, these are very well done. You can see the detail on it. And then you get down here, and this poor guy is missing some antlers. The attention to detail is not quite the same on a picture like this. This one also is not as sharply done. Her face has a little bit of shadowing on it. But then these are beautifully done on this side with the bright colors with the Caribbean scene. You would also find paint by numbers on tollware trays as well. And there's something that I always seek out when I'm out looking, and I will always just scoop them up because I love the collection.
And here's something you're offering in your store.
Absolutely. So this is another small business based out of, I believe they're in Tennessee, called Paint the Town by Numbers, and it's an ornament kit. So this company is really taking the vintage paint by numbers and really modernizing it with some different ideas. And so these are sets of Christmas ornaments. But again, you get the palette of colors and the paintbrushes and everything included. So just a new way to bring a fresh idea to a vintage kind of art.
And as I was walking around the store, we were talking about these amazing jadeite bowls. This is something that was popularized by Martha Stewart, good 20 years ago now.
Absolutely.
But you brought up a really excellent point, and I'm going to let you jump in.
Sure. So jadeite has been around for a very long time, and we have a few different pieces. And at eye level, you might not be able to tell the difference, but these pieces are quite different in age. The one on my left hand is from 1960s. It's because it's marked Anchor Hocking, Jadeite, Fire King. But much older would have been a very small marking on the back that also says Fire King. And so you can tell there's a little bit of different opaque of the darker.
Absolutely.
And a little bit lighter on the newer. And I believe this is also an older one as well.
Yes. But a different mark on the bottom.
Different mark on the bottom is how you would tell the difference and try to age which pieces are from which decade. But this stuff is indestructible, and it's great to have. And these would have been fruit bowls. So this is a very small portion of how we would have used to have had a small portion of fruit.
This is so interesting because this speaks to how our idea of portion control, when Coke was first introduced, you would buy it basically in a 4-ounce glass, and that was a full serving. And now, of course, we supersize ourselves.
64 ounces.
But thank you so much. And you mentioned that you do a lot of research to come to learn about all these differences.
I'm not an expert in any particular field, but I do like to find out exactly what things are. And the internet has so much good information out there. Despite the bad information, there's a lot of good that business owners, like myself, can find out information and be able to pass it on to our customers.
Thank you so much again.
2020 has been a crazy year. However, we were able to start this show, Trash or Treasure, brought to you by Zebra TV and the Zebra Press. I want to thank our sponsor, Alexandria Auctions, and thank all of those of you who emailed your questions in and your objects. It's been a lot of fun to work with you. I want to thank our producer, Lainey Delaney, our editor, Susan Fleischman, and our executive director, Mary Wadland. To all of you, have a wonderful end of year and better tidings ahead in 2021. Thank you.